Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our fourth Tech Talk for nonprofits on social media strategies. It's so wonderful to have you all here today. We have so many community members joining us for today's session, which is so exciting. I'm going to give everyone a few more seconds to enter the webinar. Welcome to those of you just joining us now. I will let you know today's session will be recorded and will be available on our website in a few weeks, and you are most welcome to share that across your teams and networks. We have a lot of incredible content to get through today in a really short session, so I'm going to kick us off with some brief introductions. My name is Sarah Sanford. I'm the Director of Operations with NCW Tech Alliance. We are a regional nonprofit organization with a mission to bring people and technology resources together. We provide programs and services in technology, entrepreneurship, and STEM education. And as part of our work to bridge the digital divide across the region, we are running a digital equity commitments campaign, and we would love for you to join us. We're inviting organizations across Chelan, Douglas, Grant, and Okanagan counties to get involved and make commitments to expand digital equity across North Central Washington. And commitments can be big or small. Every action makes a really big difference. And any organization in need of financial aid to fulfill those commitments can apply for a micro grant, which with awards reaching up to $4,000. So a big thank you to Thriving Together NCW. So more information is available on our website, or you can use that QR code on the screen. I'll also be sending a follow-up email after today's session, and I'll include some links in that as well. So a brief introduction: if this is your first Tech Talk for Nonprofits, these are free quarterly webinars brought to you by the Nonprofit Practices Institute, or NPI, and NCW Tech Alliance, and moderated by Martin Straub of Simple Power IT, who I'll introduce you to in just a few moments. These Tech Talks are designed to be educational sessions targeted to nonprofits, but anyone is welcome to join on various technology topics of most interest to you, our community. These topics were voted on by you through our feedback survey, which I'll also share in an email after today's session. We'd love your input as we begin to plan future sessions. But I did want to say, save the date for our next Tech Talk, which is going to be August 27th at 12 p.m. And it's going to be an introduction to Canva. So Canva is an incredible free-to-use online graphic design tool. And Dominic, our content expert today, is going to be touching on Canva a little bit as well. I used it to create this presentation. It's a really amazing tool to use. So make sure you mark the date, August 27th. It's going to be an incredible session, that one not to miss. So unfortunately, we don't have anyone from NPI to represent today, but I would do a brief introduction. They're here to help nonprofit organizations in North Central Washington to strengthen their skills and grow their potential with affordable and accessible trainings, workshops, and networking opportunities. So please do visit their website. They're a great resource for nonprofits in our region. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Martin Straub of Simple Power IT, our facilitator for today's session, who will be introducing Dominic, our content expert today, in just a few moments. Thank you, Martin.
My pleasure, and thanks for putting these together, Sarah. It's fun to always have big audiences like we have today, which looks like we have over 30 people participating so far, which is great, and a few familiar names. Simple Power IT works with a lot of nonprofits and for-profits, but we started the business about 12 years ago, specifically serving nonprofits in the North Central Washington area. And what I mean by serving is we provide sort of all level of IT services, but what we aren't really great at is website development or social media, which is one where we bring in people like Dominic and oftentimes we just make referrals to what we can't do well. We just try to refer to other partners and organizations in the region to help our clients make sure that they're successful with their current challenges. And this is one that comes up often, quite frankly, with our clients. Hey, do you know how to do blah, blah, blah on the website? Or do you know how to add video? Or do you know? And I'm like, not something we do every day. I know and Dominic now is going to be just the person that I'll refer future clients to. But we've worked together in the past too, because Dominic's been in this space for a while. So I'm going to do a little more introduction of Dominic. And thank you, Dominic, for giving some time today. Dominic actually, unlike some of us, is doing a little bit leveraging his degree still a little bit in that he has a communications degree from the Edward Monroe College of Communications at Wazoo. And I don't know if you wanted to share exactly what year that was, but somewhere back, a few years back anyway, like many of us on the call. He studied journalism and political science there, and he edited the college paper. But so he has these great communication background, which he still leverages in his storytelling in a digital format today, as well as I know they do some video work and elsewhere. So, everything pretty much that we consume nowadays is in some sort of digital format, and Dominic has been able to sort of pivot and use his communication skills that way. Today, he's going to cover some basic tips and tricks to make your social content more interesting and engaging, as well as some third-party tools that you can use to make it a little easier to develop that content. And then we were talking just on the call about how you always sort of have to pivot. Oh, that word's kind of overused these days, but to adjust to the algorithms that the social media sites use to sort of catapult and get attention to some of your posts. So Dominic's going to talk a little bit on that as well. So without further ado, Dominic, and sorry, yes, thank you for this slide, Sarah. I wanted to make sure to remind everyone, we're trying to keep the session concise as possible, but we will have a question and answer time at the end. So the best thing you can do, I'm going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A panel. So go ahead and just put your questions in written form. I'll be looking at those, and then we'll funnel those to Dominic at starting around 12:30. And if we don't get to them all, we'll funnel those off to Dominic probably in an email at the end. So please just put those there, and I'll try to put questions together and funnel them to Dominic. So thank you. Thanks for the reminder there, Sarah. And Dominic, off to you.
Thanks, Martin. Dominic, I'm going to stop share so you can share your presentation now.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm happy to be here and honored to be asked to present some tips, tools, and tricks that I have are kind of my go-to in my toolkit for social media content, and some strategies about how to use them in the most effective way, with helping or feeding into what the algorithm, primarily what Meta wants creators to do. So my goal is to provide practical advice on how to make your brand's social media channels more engaging and provide a simple toolkit to help you create high quality content. So the idea is that, you know your brand, and you probably have some sort of communication strategy. At least I hope that you do, as well as how that fits into your probably a strategic plan. So we're going to go over more in the trenches kind of topics of how to take that idea and that strategy and translate that into effective social media content. And primarily, we're going to be talking about Facebook and Instagram, which are Meta-owned platforms. And, typically I tell clients Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it at this point, isn't really worth, in my opinion, worth the time and energy for local regional brands like ours. It's very useful for media, for reporters, and useful for corporations, national and international corporations, not so much local. So yeah, I encourage you to drop your questions into the chat, and we'll get to as many of those at the end as possible. And I'll try and get through this as quickly as possible, while also hitting our important points here. So I'm going to start with tools, and then we'll talk about tips in kind of the next section. First of all, I always start with Meta's scheduling tools. You can pay for Hootsuite, and that used to be maybe 5 years ago a very worthwhile investment, but you can pretty much do everything from Meta Business Suite that you could do from Hootsuite, and it's free. So I would suggest doing that. What I like is once I have, my content created, and maybe I use Canva or I use some other third-party thing, or I just, took a good photo with my phone, I can go in and I can, from my phone, or, what I suggest is using the dashboard on your computer. I can schedule that content throughout the week. And that's typically what I like to do. So, for you, not knowing exactly where you're all coming from, and what roles you play within your organizations. Typically, when I talk to clients, there's somebody who might be the marketing person, and they've got a lot to do. They've got to, put out their annual report, and they've got to update the website and send out email, you know, newsletters, and then the social media. So sometimes they can get overloaded, and this is a tool that can help you, depending on your time management skills, help you kind of alleviate some of that burden of that workload. So I suggest taking, an hour or two a week, once you have kind of created your content, you have an idea of what content you want to put out, and just taking that, optimizing that content, and then using the scheduling tool to schedule that stuff during the times when it's going to be most effective. And I suggest the 2 hours typically before a normal 9 to 5, or 8 to 4 workday starts, and then in the evenings, because you can see, and later we'll talk about analytics and insights, but you can kind of see that there are spikes, and it may kind of follows common sense, right? I mean, a lot of people can't be on their phones on social media during work hours, even though they are, well, many are. But you're going to see a lot more engagement before and after your typical workday. So scheduling things to hit those peak times is just working with the algorithm, and it's advantageous, planning basically. So I'll send this link to this slideshow out. Sarah will probably send it out, and there's a link here to a great step-by-step breakdown on exactly how to link your accounts, your Facebook and your Instagram, as well as use that business suite to get started scheduling. I don't want to go through it, in granular detail, but that article does. So, the next session is really going to be a deep dive on Canva, but I'll just say that it's probably it's my go-to tool when it comes to creating third-party creation of content. So there's a free and a paid version. Since I use it so much, I do pay for the enterprise version, and I find it worth I think it's $120 a year for that. And typically I use it for social media posts. And I'll show you just a couple of things that I've worked up recently for clients in Canva. I really like it for using photos and text together. And you can see here's one in the middle that I took a quote from Randy Smith, who's a Schlen PUD commissioner. And I interviewed him, and I did a little video, and we made a reel and stuff like that as well. But, I just took the time to take a couple of snaps with my phone, and then later, as I'm editing, the audio and video, I found a quote that is short enough and poignant enough just to throw in there. And it's, a great additional piece of content, because let's face it, the way that the news feed works, if you post something at 9 o'clock in the morning, by 9 o'clock at night, people might not even see it anymore unless it's really relevant and viral. So, taking the one interview that I spent a lot of time on and really creating like 3 different types of content: a long form video, a reel, a short form video, which is like 90 seconds or less, and then a couple stills with quotes. I'm getting 4 or 5 pieces of content out of that one 25-minute interview that I did in the parking lot of the old PUD with Mr. Smith. So, the other one that I wanted to highlight are these, This was a Raise the Net fundraiser for the volleyball team that needs new nets at Wenatchee High School. So they reached out to me and they said, "Hey, can you help out with this? We're thinking of, a visual way." Well, first of all, I set up a website for them, and then they were like, "We really want a visual way to mark progress." And so they had the idea of maybe a thermometer, which you see quite often. So I used Canva to kind of work something up that helped them reach that goal, actually. So the website plus the graphics that we put together, and just it being a really popular, community rallying point, helped them reach that goal. So another thing is brochures, logos, maps. That's one that I threw together for Leavenworth Outdoor Center to kind of help them in their safety talk before people go out on the river. Another tool, or a third-party tool, that I use quite a bit is Pixabay, and I like it because it's free, and you can find a lot of photos in there. The downside is that there's not a lot of local photos. So if you're looking for something, of the Leavenworth Christmas tree lighting festival or whatever, or Oktoberfest or Apple Blossom, you're going to be out of luck there. But you can find interesting, funny, and creative photography there that you can use in different ways. And the cool thing about it too is that Pixabay links with Canva, so you can find a photo and click on the import to Canva tab or button, and it will automatically, if you're signed into your Canva, it'll automatically open that image in Canva and be ready to edit as you want. Artlist is another one, and this is primarily, we're going to transition a little bit away from still frame images and talk more about video and some tools to create simple, easy video either on your phone or on your desktop. So I use Artlist primarily for royalty-free music. A lot of times, and you've probably figured this out, if you try and use your favorite pop song in a video on Facebook, it immediately flags it and it won't get served to anybody. And it's basically going to shadow ban that piece of content, which is completely counterproductive. If you've spent the time and energy to make a reel or a TikTok or video, you don't want it being essentially blacklisted from the platform because you used copywritten material or music. So Artlist provides some of those music options that I also go for stuff that's instrumental. And they've got a lot of that stuff, huge selection. And that's why I primarily gravitate to that. Again, there's a free and a paid version. I pay for the yearly, the annual subscription because I use that so much, primarily just for the music, but there's other stuff that you can do as find there as little stock footage, video templates, stuff like that. I don't use that much, but their music library is very large and good. Adobe Rush. This is another one that's freemium, model where the free product is pretty good. It can be a little glitchy, but if you have patience with that, and I've noticed that it's gotten less glitchy since they rolled it out in 2021. This is a great third-party app that you can download on your phone or you can use on your desktop, and it really cuts down on the expertise that you need to create high quality videos that look just a step above that very entry level phone video content. So they've got intros and outros, transitions. There is music in Adobe Rush as well that's royalty free and won't trigger those copyright infringement issues. So I suggest using that. One of the things that I like most is that you can automatically toggle vertical video there. So if you take video horizontal, which I don't recommend, I recommend shooting in vertical because that's the most friendly to the algorithm these days, even though I don't like vertical video personally. Even if you shoot in horizontal, you can toggle a little switch in Adobe Rush that will make it into a vertical format and essentially crop it automatically for you, so that you can export a version of that video that's more social media friendly. CapCut is my go-to for primarily subtitles. So it's like an AI powered video editor, and you can do a lot like you can in Adobe Rush. It's got, graphic overlays, intros, outros, templated stuff like credits that you can roll at the end, as well as it's a good tool for video memes, which I'll get into in a little bit here. But primarily I use it for its subtitle generator because it's so easy and you can customize the subtitles to be more stylistically pleasing, aesthetically pleasing than if you're just using like Adobe Premiere or Adobe Rush. You still need to read through the subtitles, but I really have to say it's amazingly good at automatically understanding what is said and generating pretty clean subtitles. So, where I used to go through 5 years ago and spend 45 minutes typing in subtitles, now I can do this with this subtitle generator on CapCut in 5 minutes. And I've got a reel that has really good subtitles. And the reason that you should use subtitles for everything is A, because it's more accessible for everybody. And B, you'll probably know this just from being a user, but when you're on Facebook or Instagram, the sound doesn't start. The video will start, but the sound does not automatically go. You have to tap on it to actually hear what's being said. And a lot of people don't do that, but they will read along with the subtitles. So if you've got subtitles there, it's more engaging and it's going to keep those viewers, those users viewing that content for longer. And you can see that difference in your insights and analytics, which we'll go into here in a bit. So here's some, tips and tricks transitioning out of these tools to use and more into the strategies behind why create content in the way that is friendly to the algorithm. And this is kind of, one of my go-to quotes in presentations, and it's by Seth Godin. And in a crowded marketplace, fitting in, and I can't actually read it because I've got people over my the end of it, but you can read it. Basically his point is not standing out is being invisible. And you can that also makes sense if you're a social media user. Typically, the more novel the content, the more viral or the further it goes. So you can get into some dark places if you're only trying to create novel content, as YouTube has shown us over the last 10 years. So I don't recommend this being your only operating principle, but it is something to think about. Like, I always think about every time that I make a piece of content, how can I make this more interesting visually or more novel so that it goes further and it gets more engagement and more shares. So just briefly kind of overlook on how Meta structures its algorithm. And this is a metaphor that this is a kind of a way to look at it that I learned at a Facebook seminar in Seattle at their corporate headquarters in Seattle. And they explain, this is how Facebook people themselves explained how the algorithm works. Essentially, there's four signifying things: inventory, signals, predictions, and score. So they explained it, and I think it's a good way to explain it, is you're waiting for a friend, and they're late for lunch, but you know your friend, and you can kind of predict based on what's available on the menu, what time of day it is, is it lunch, dinner, and predictions, knowing that friend, well, do they, are they vegetarian? Do they not eat gluten? Do they not like, do they have a peanut butter allergy? These things because you know that person. And this is the creepy part of Facebook. They know us very well because they they store data on all of their users. And the more you use the platform, the more data you provide them with. So they more or less know what your preferences are. And then the score is that result of all of those inputs being taken into account. So, that's a way to conceptualize how the algorithm works and, how to create content that is served to more people. This is something that I repeat often, and it's social media. So be social. So, so often, and I understand it because there's really big regulatory restrictions when it comes to industries like the medical industry or banking or real estate. And there are things that you have to watch out for when it comes to social issues and, making ads on Facebook. They're very persnickety about that. But at the end of the day, there are you just have to get creative, and there are ways to be social, even if your brand has major regulatory uh, boundaries as far as what you can and cannot say. Another piece of advice that I give people is identify influencers, and I'm not just talking about like YouTube superstars or Instagram, models and people with a million viewers who are off and, doing interesting things in Dubai and stuff like that. I'm talking about, local influencers. There's influencers at all level. It doesn't have to be a global influencer. One of our clients for many years was the Wenatchee Senior Center. And they're influencers within the community at the senior center. More people show up when certain individuals show up for lunch, for instance. So if you even take into account that and you say, okay, well, Barb's really popular. Let's do a little write up on Barb and put that on the social media, on Instagram and Facebook and our email newsletter. Or, Jim did something interesting this month. He went to Florida for a golf tournament. Okay, let's talk about that. So you're using people genuinely like and are interested in, and I don't want to say using, but you're leveraging their influence. And it's something that we do in all facets of life. It's just a little bit, I don't know why it doesn't occur to people in local markets too. And you don't necessarily need to like pay people money or monetary things. You can just showcasing people and putting them up as examples of good examples. They like that. That's their ego likes that. So playing into that kind of a thing sometimes can make you friends and allies for your brand. And then also find your tribe. So, a lot of times Facebook groups and Reddit threads are places where consumers that you're targeting or that you want to interact with are coalescing organically. So go to those places. Like I kind of talk about it like a fishing hole, right? It's like you can throw your hook out in the middle of the river that's running in the middle of the Columbia, but really the fish are coalescing in these eddies and these these pools where the current's not so strong and they can kind of hang out. So like go to those places if you want to catch fish, essentially. And then embrace the meme. And this is another thing, like be social, right? So here's an example of a reel, and I'll play it real quick. But you probably saw this, like this was pretty popular like 2 months ago. This old clip from SNL of Bill Hader dancing in a like one of those booths that you grab money from. went viral for some reason. And it's like a 7-year-old clip, but people used it in really interesting ways. And I was like, how can I leverage this? So I made this TikTok for the Wenatchee Valley YMCA for their capital campaign in CapCut, so kind of coming back to that tool. And here it is. Right. So you kind of get the point there. And it said something was wrong. Could you guys see that?
The audio was a little tough, but we could see it.
Okay. Cool. Let me get back over to my presentation. Yeah. So, that's an example of something where you kind of catch on to a trend in a trending viral moment and leverage it for your own thing. And really all I did was I went to the YMCA and I just got some vertical video with my phone and just threw it into CapCut, and it probably took me 15 minutes to make that reel. They got about 1,000 views on TikTok, I think. And it's just it changes it up, right? From like, please donate, and there's a match, please donate, give us your money, to it makes it fun and social. And the last thing really that I want to say about like tips or tricks is that remember that a lot of times people get writer's block because of the blank page. And so you're thinking about everything that could be. And so you get overwhelmed and you don't think about I just need to tell one story. So think about that. Is that somebody who has a birthday or accomplished some professional or personal goal or ran a marathon in your office or something like that? Find stories that personalize your team and your people, and then put that out there. People are interested if somebody had a baby or especially in this community, it's a very close-knit community, and people want to celebrate the wins, so let them do that. And that's kind of paraphrasing one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite shows, The Wire. Gus is an editor at the Baltimore Sun, and he tells his reporters every day as they go out, there's a million stories in the city. I just want one. And so think about that when you're thinking about creating content. You don't need to tell every story. You just need to find one at a time and put one foot in front of the other and choose the most interesting content. And then I've got a couple of slides on keeping track of data. And I just don't want to go too far over and eat into our Q&A time. But you guys can see at the end of this the deal, I've got a couple slides on keeping track of data, and I definitely recommend that and recommend going in at least once a month and looking at what your trends are and what content performed the best. And you'll find it's a little bit of an addictive thing, because when you do well, you see that and you're like, okay, well, that meme or that photo with a quote or that reel that I made really performed well. And over time, you find those trends and you can kind of latch on to what's successful and really not spend so much time working on stuff that doesn't perform well or engage users. So yeah, with that, I mean, it's kind of the brief overview, and I wanted to make sure that we have enough time for questions and comments. So do we want to transition into that now, Sarah?
That would be great. Thank you so much, Dominic. That was fantastic. I'll hand it over to you and Martin now to filter through some of the questions that are coming in. And if we don't get to answer them all today, if we do run out of time, I'm sure Dominic would be happy to answer those via email. So I'll make sure I keep a record of those.
Yeah, super. Dominic, thanks very much. And go ahead, if other people have questions, feel free to keep adding them to the Q&A. I've been monitoring those, and I think what I'll do, Dominic, is I'm going to group a few of them together and sort of try to ask them by topical area. So there were a couple of questions that were first related to trying to target a specific audience group. And there were, and or two questions in particular were about targeting young, how to get engagement of younger people. And it was kind of a two-part question. One person asked specifically about, are there specific platforms that are best to target young people? Like they asked about Snapchat and Discord. And then someone else said, well, we have a organization, I think they said a museum, that typically younger people aren't paying attention to our posts. And they asked, is there any way they can like game the system without having to pay for posting to try to get their posts in front of more younger eyes? So kind of a two-part question there. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely TikTok. And I know it's a controversial platform because, the government's considering banning it. But they've been rattling that saber for the last 5 years or so, and it hasn't gone anywhere. And it is definitely where younger demographics hang out. Basically under 30, but you really see a major group of its users are under 20 and in their teens. Snapchat, I don't recommend because there's really two reasons. The fleeting nature of the content that you can put out. And I'm not saying that there aren't strategies, and if you really want to make that work, and that's like your thing, and it works with your brand, go for it. But in general, the content that you put out goes away after 24 hours. And it's, I guess unless I was like a pop-up nightclub or something like that, like a little bit underground, and you want to cultivate an air of mystery and that kind of hip thing, that's where I would use Snapchat. But for just reaching like young people where they are, definitely think about TikTok. And that's kind of the reason that I also mentioned those third-party apps like CapCut and Premiere Rush, is you can create things in that vertical format and then import them into your phone and upload them into TikTok. Unfortunately, there's no dashboard or anything like that to use TikTok from your desktop. But I'll create reels on my desktop, export them to my phone, or post them to Meta. And I'll take the same content and post it to TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, so that I'm getting my maximum exposure from that same piece of content, because there's really not too much overlap. And even if there is, nobody's like, well, I saw that on Instagram already. They don't care. They just saw it in two different places. But typically there's not a huge overlap between your average TikTok user and like they're not using Facebook, right? That's for their grandparents. So, but the same piece of content can be funny, like that Bill Hader, video. That's still funny to a grandma. So meet the grandmas where they are on Facebook, and then, the grandkids are on TikTok, and they can also laugh at that. And then I also see that Facebook groups are they still effective? I think, yeah, for local or specific uh, interests, they're still effective. So if I was I don't know, the Time Capsule is a great local business that's an example of someone that could leverage Facebook groups based on interest, I think, pretty well, as Reddit sub threads or whatever, essentially the same thing. It's just an area for people to coalesce around a shared interest, whether that's we all live in the same town, or we like old video games or sneakers. You know what I mean? So finding those people where they are, I think, is a worthwhile endeavor, because then you can craft content that is more interesting to them. And yeah, you can totally get spammy. And that's really up to the creativity of the content creator. I really stress, do not repeat content. And as much as we want to, because it makes it easier, once I use a piece of content, it's got to change somehow for me to use it again. And you see this a lot from real estate people and from um, banks. It's just like the same image that's just posted over and over again. And that's the best way to drive all engagement away from your endeavor.
Well, that's actually a good segue into a sort of another sort of general question, group of questions that we had, which was about sort of the frequency of posting, reposting, versus like if you don't have a paid person that does social media, what's the right answer? How do you strike that balance, Dominic? What do you say? How do you still stay relevant without also being overwhelming?
Yeah, well, it definitely depends on your brand, but I would, in general, suggest that you want to have a post a day, um, if not every other day. Um, and that can be, it doesn't have to be like a video that you spent 4 hours making. It can be uh, still frames is that's I describe it like a baseball pitcher, right? You essentially got like four, maybe five pitches, but they pitch, you know, 7 games of the World Series with 4 or 5 pitches. So, another metaphor I use is a pop song, right? I mean, all the Beatles songs are like 4 chords, basically. It's how you change up those 4 chords that makes a song interesting or terrible, you know? So if you're just playing the same chord for 4 minutes straight, nobody's going to want to listen to that. But if you're changing up your content, um, in interesting ways, but essentially saying the same thing in different ways, you can make it interesting and novel and relevant. And that's where the images are really the workhorse. And I stress, quality images and taking photos with your phones. It doesn't have to be super high-end equipment. It just needs to feel organic. It needs to feel organic. It can be planned, but it needs to have
Mhm.
an organic feel.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit. I thought this was an interesting question, particularly with your mentioning of trying to, localize and target to your audience. One of the questions that I saw was about, and you were talking about captioning, adding captions. So there was a question about language. What's the proper language to use, particularly if you're trying to target like the Hispanic audience? What should you do? English and a Spanish one? Should you so what's your thoughts on that? Is that worth the effort, or how does that play into things?
That's an excellent question. And I suggest using your subtitles to reach both language speakers. So if I'm doing an English, or my individual the subject that's on video is an English speaker and they're speaking English, I can export using CapCut. You can actually translate. And again, it's not perfect. It does need to be reviewed, but you can translate a Spanish version of those subtitles. And so that's what I recommend is if you've got an English speaker, do Spanish subtitles, and vice versa. If you've got a Spanish speaker, do English subtitles, because then both groups of people can consume the same piece of content at the same time.
Super. Okay. Well, we're at 12:44. So I think that, and Sarah tells me we have a hard stop at 12:45. So we're just at about time. We had a few questions that didn't get answered, but we were able to address quite a few of them, I think, in that grouping of them. Sarah, can I hand it back off to you for sort of final wrap up and how and what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for facilitating that Q&A, Martin. Everybody, there are some really incredible questions that have come through. So thank you so much for submitting those. And we will promise to get those questions answered to you in a follow-up wrap-up email, as well as Dominick's slide deck, which has so much incredible information in there that you're welcome to share with your teams and networks. And there will be a copy of today's recording posted up on our website in a couple of weeks. So look out for that one as well. But really appreciate you all joining us today. And a big thank you to Dominick for taking the time out today. It was amazing. Dominick, thank you for sharing all of this incredible knowledge and wisdom with us. I found it really informative. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.